Welcome to another exciting clubhouse. This week's episode is balancing life as a mom-trepreneur. Shout out to all the moms out there. I know Mother's Day just passed just this past weekend, but even to all the single fathers that are out there too, or parents in general, right? We all know that balancing life or even a business is already difficult as it is with all the day-to-day things that take place. And so this week's discussion is how do you balance that out? And so this, is brought to you by Mission Matters. And for all of those out there that are going to be listening in, since these conversations are recorded, Mission Matters is a media platform really focused on the needs of entrepreneurs, executives, experts. We highlight and want to showcase and inspire and educate future generations and really showcase what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Getting into the weeds on a wide variety of topics. We have about 12 different shows that we oversee and about 5,000 podcast episodes. And excuse me because I'm at the airport, everyone. So there might be some sound over here. So I'll try to keep myself on mute and keep this minimal. But just as that. So with that, we have Joanna Pineda with us. She is a mom and also a business owner, and we're going to get a little bit more insight. But with that, maybe Joanna, why don't you feel free to introduce yourself?
So I am a mom, I am a CEO, I'm a chief troublemaker, I'm a Cub Scout leader, I'm a Boy Scout leader, and I'm a martial artist. So I have a pretty full life, and I don't know if balance is the right way to describe what you try to achieve. I don't know if you're trying to achieve balance. I think I'm trying to achieve, God, I don't know what the word is, Chirag. What would you call it? Because balance implies equality, and I don't know that equality is what you're trying to achieve.
You make a good point. Maybe it's not balance, right? I call it an adventure. The way that I see life is it's a journey, right? And the question is how do you provide enough time to your kids or to your loved ones while still running a business, right? Because I think we all want to be successful. I'm not a parent yet, so I can't speak on that directly, but I speaking to my parents because I've actually had conversations with them about this, especially because my dad was a business owner too.
Hmm.
And it was always striking that making sure that you have enough time, right, is really what you're trying to do. Is how do you preserve your time and give enough attention to the kids, to your significant others, while at the same time still running a business, because running both are equally important. I think the way that my dad describes it is, running your business is almost like raising a family, right? And when you're just starting a business, it's like it's in its infancy, and it requires a lot more of your time and bandwidth. Over time, as you're growing the company, that's really what you're able to derive from this. Is how do you create enough time for yourself so you could, and maybe it's not balanced, but at least have enough time in each of your buckets or categories. And it's not an easy question. I think from what I know it's pretty ongoing discussion on how do you have enough time to give to your kids and at the same time your business. And I guess maybe that actually
I
would be my
think
first
that's a good
question to you.
question. And I think 100%, when you talk about your business being another child, I mean, I have talked about Matrix Group, my company, as my third baby. I've talked about the CRM that we developed as my fourth baby. I've talked about our virtual event tech platform as my fifth baby. So, you have to conceive of them, you have to nurture them, you birth them, you grow them, you nurture them. So 100%, these are your babies, and you've got to figure out how to find time to give them all the focus that they need so that they can blossom. I got a couple of thoughts on this. One is, I think you need to be organized, and I think you need to have focus. I've got a friend, for example, and he and I do martial arts together, and I'm pretty disciplined about being in the studio because I find that it's part of, we can talk about that later, but it's part of, how I stay in shape, how I manage my stress, etc. And that's the one thing that I do, that's basically outside of work, family, and some of these other volunteer things. Meanwhile, he's got a lot of other interests, and I can't afford that. For me, in order to give enough focus time to the things that I have in my life, I have to limit what I'm doing so that I can focus. I don't do 20,000 things. If I want to be a really good CEO, if I want to be a really good mom, if I want to be a really good Cub Scout leader, because that's pretty important to me too, I can't have extraneous things. So that's my one tip. My other
Mm.
tip, Chirag, is I'm really organized, and for people who are parents, I tell them all the time, Google Calendar is your friend. And this sounds kind of silly, but many, many years ago, my husband and I established the Cato Pineda calendar. So he's Michael Cato, I'm Joanna Pineda. We established a calendar, so I don't use my Joanna Pineda personal Google Calendar. We have a family calendar. Every member of the family is subscribed to it. And the rule is if it's after 6 p.m. during the week and all weekend, it is on the family calendar. And it is color coded to the person who is attending it.
Oh, I love that.
And what it does, Chirag, is everyone in the family is really in the know about what's happening so that then we don't waste a lot of time on scheduling. My husband will say, "What are we doing on Saturday?" And I'll say, "Honestly, I have no idea. Look at the calendar. Oh, look, it's CJ's prom." And he'll say, "Well, are we involved in that? Do we need to give them a ride or anything?" And I'll say, "No." "Great, awesome. That means the night is free. That means I can schedule something else." So we're really disciplined about when all these emails come flying from the school, we put it in the calendar. And then we don't have, I think what happens, Chirag, is when you have all these kind of, different things in your life, you end up with conflicts, but you're going to have fewer conflicts if you've got a clean calendar and you don't have double bookings and then you're kind of having to cancel and change your plans. That just doesn't happen as much to me because my calendar is clean. And because everything's on Google, my work, my family, my Cub Scouts, and my martial arts, my phone is my friend. I know everything happening with every member of my family at all times, pretty much.
I love that. I'm actually curious. Are your kids, or how early are they adapting and using Google Calendar or becoming familiar with that? Because I didn't even start using that until really, I think, my first job, which was right out of college.
I think so. I have an 11-year-old and a 17-year-old, and my 11-year-old has been on Google Calendar probably since he was 7 or 8, and he knows. So here's a simple example. Any play date, it's on the calendar. It's on there. It includes travel time. It's got the address. So if I'm taking, then it says Joanna's taking, if it's my husband. Or if my husband's taking, he'll say, "Where am I going?" I'll say, "It's all in the calendar." And he'll say, "Great." And then I don't have to be around to play traffic cop. I don't need to be around last minute. I can be out of town and I know that he knows where he has to go. And it's those things that I think fritter away time and cause stress when there's a lot going on. And I think in my family, we just avoid a lot of that. And I'll tell you another story. So my son is a almost Eagle Scout, knock on wood, cross fingers. And there's the merit badge in Boy Scouts called Family Life. One of the things that you have to do as part of family life is organize family meeting and hold family meetings for 3 months. So we started having family meetings on Sunday night, and the way we do it in our family is we talk about, kind of what we've done, what we thought about the weekend. We do a little gratitude thing, and then I spend 20 minutes going over the schedule for the week. I whip out my phone and I say, "What's going on Monday? Okay, who's got what? Who's picking up? Blah blah blah." And then I'll say, "Who's got an issue?" So we kind of do issue processing in my family. And the issues can be as simple as I need a new desk to why can't I, have curfew later, all of that stuff. But and again, what my kids love is they know that if there's something that they really need discussed as a family, Sunday's the time to bring it up and they know they'll get airtime. But we go over the
It,
schedule for the week, and and obviously things happen during the week, but I'll look at it and I'll say, "All right, school's doing a fundraiser on Tuesday. Are we doing that?" "Yes, we are." "Okay, great, that's confirmed." And then I'll look and I'll say, "Oh God, pajama days on Friday." And Chirag, like you said, you don't have kids. What you don't want to be is the parent whose kid isn't dressed in pajamas on pajama day, or who didn't bring the stuffed animal on stuffed animal day. So have it on the calendar and you have notifications set properly. Those notifications tell you a half hour before you're supposed to leave the house that it's pajama day. Then again, you don't have stress because you're organized.
well, I love that. I actually have a couple follow-up questions, but before we dive into all that, I would love for you to kind of maybe share a little bit more about the different companies and, maybe just as an entrepreneur, what are you currently working on? Just for our audience that maybe aren't familiar or maybe it's their first time hearing, what you're currently doing. And I
Sure.
think that could maybe provide a little context too.
So, so my company is Matrix Group International. We're a digital agency. We're based out of Arlington, Virginia, although really I have no idea where my staff are these days because we have not gone back to the office in Chirag. We probably will not. We have found during this pandemic, we can talk about that another time, how much creativity and productivity and collaboration have actually exploded during the pandemic. So anyway, we're a digital agency and we have several sides to the business. We've got a custom development side that does websites, mobile apps, custom integrations, custom development. And then we actually have a CRM that is used by associations and nonprofits to manage their organizations. So it helps them manage their memberships, their donations, their event registrations, their product sales, et cetera. And then we have our latest kind of endeavor is we have an event tech platform called Bespeak, and it allows organizations to have hybrid and virtual conferences. And what we wanted to do with our event tech platform is really help our clients create events that were unique, that felt handcrafted, and that have a lot of the benefits that you have an in-person event with the intentionality for getting people together, making sure that exhibitors, for example, have a lot of really, really, really good benefits and making the education a lot more than just a bunch of squares in a Zoom meeting. And what I am working on right now is thinking about what the meetings and events landscape is going to look like moving forward. Because I think on the one hand, there are organizations that just want to get back to normal, but I don't believe that's really possible. I think we are all changed as people, as companies. And so, because I have so many clients that rely on conferences and events for revenue and also for community and for, benefits that they provide to their customers, that's what we're working on. What do events and conferences look like moving forward? What does hybrid look like? What are the different flavors of hybrid and how do you create meaningful interactions between in-person and virtual attendees?
Oh, I love that. Contextually, this makes way more sense how you're so organized, right? I mean, you do event planning, you've been in that world for long enough.
Hmm.
And I think just by nature, I think it makes parenting a lot easier, just given the profession, because I feel like, I'm saying this because I've, in my past life, I guess even right now, coordinating these events, I put together maybe some 500 plus events throughout my lifetime
Yes,
and I didn't, and it wasn't until you get all the context that you realize, what, planning an event, planning weddings, planning anything, right? That's basically I think a good chunk of what being a parent is, right? It's just being prepared and planning for schedules and making sure that you guys have the right allocation, right, between yourself and your husband in this case. I mean, raising the
100%.
kids. So
Yes,
that
100%. So, and just like events, parenting is, well, first of all, my husband and I like to say that if you're not organized as a parent, you're toast. Because, I mean, I remember when my son started preschool, it was very sweet, and you got maybe an email once, every couple of weeks about what was happening. And then all of a sudden, bam, they start elementary school, and you get emails from the school, and you get emails from the teacher, and you get emails from the room parents, and then you get emails from the PTA, and then you multiply that by 2 kids, and you think, oh my God, I am toast. How do I manage all this? And how do you make it so that you're, one, kind of staying on top of all the different deadlines, but also getting to enjoy the things that are made available to you if you're organized. So, for example, when my sons were in second grade, they did something called coffee house at their school, which is basically you get to come in and for half an hour you sit next to your kid. He sips hot chocolate, you sip coffee or tea, and you read next to each other. You don't read to him, you read next to each other. They called it coffee house. If you're not organized, you'll never get to enjoy that because you won't fit it into your schedule or you'll realize too late that it's happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. That does. So I'm actually curious on this because I know your kids are pretty much teenagers, right? At this point,
Yes.
11 and then the 17-year-old, right? How much more different would it be if, say they were, if your little ones, well, if they weren't 11 and 17, how does this change or adapt if, say, they're just newborns or they're under 5 years old or, 5 to 15 years old, right? Because I know you're using the Google Calendar system. It makes sense because,
Right, right.
they're teenagers, but how would you adapt this to, say, someone that's older? And then we just have Jeff. He just joined, of course, our head of the whole book publishing department, and Jeff's got some kids, so I know I would love to get his
Jeff,
input as well.
I think in terms of if your kids are much younger, you still have a lot of obligations. You have obligations as a professional, you have obligations as a parent. And I think anything that helps you schedule things and not have a lot of friction, that's going to be a tool regardless. Now, I'm going to say one more thing. We're talking about kind of how do you balance, or how do you create this, how do you give each segment of your life the right time and the right focus? And I think focus, Chirag, is a really important word. One of the things that I realized probably about a decade ago, and I really credit my martial arts journey with this, was with martial arts, and I'm not very good, but I'm committed to it, right? And I go, and it's my exercise and in the end, I've realized that it's my form of meditation. The thing about martial arts, which is why I'm so committed to it, is one, I love it, it's challenging, but it's my form of mindfulness. Because unlike running or cycling, I cannot focus on anything else or I get hurt, which means that for an hour and a half, I'm not thinking about my children and I'm not thinking about my business. And I come out of it really refreshed. And what it really taught me, Chirag, is when I focus, I'm able to do so much more. So when I am in a meeting, you actually won't find me multitasking because you get a lot more done in a meeting when you're focused. When I am with my children, that you'll see I'm not on my phone. If I'm, whatever, in a meeting with a bunch of moms, we're doing maybe some fundraising, that's all I'm doing. And I think what happens, Chirag, is that whatever it is that you're doing, for me at least, becomes that much more meaningful and satisfying because you got the focus. And I think focus gives us satisfaction because we can actually do it well. I think it's when we're trying to do three things that you feel frazzled because you didn't actually get a chance to do it well.
I love that. So staying focused, staying on the money, that helps, along with the planning and the Google Calendar in this case with the family. So that's definitely helpful. Jeff,
Chirag,
just so
have
you're,
you read Getting Things Done?
it's actually on my list. Not yet.
Oh my God, it is such a good book. My husband and I read it, listened to it, come back to it, have made our kids listen to it. And one of the things that he says is if you have the, if you know all of your obligations and you know that they're somehow cataloged somewhere, and you know how to make a decision about what to do at that exact moment, you can actually relax. And I think, again, this feeling of balance and focus and feeling like we can actually do what we need to do and that we're doing the right thing comes from having a system. So when I am on this call right now with you, there is nothing else that I need to be doing or should be doing. And I think that's
Mm,
deeply satisfying, and that helps you. I mean, it's hard to describe, but for me, it just means that at the end of the day, I feel like I actually got something done and I made a meaningful connection, and it was a good day.
I love that. And thanks for the insights, getting things done,
Really
adding that,
good book.
yeah,
Now,
adding that to the list or the priority list, I should say,
listen
because
to it on the
I've
plane ride.
mm, actually, I have enough time to download it, so I might as, yeah, I'll do it.
Hi, Jeff.
Hey Jeff, you there? I think Jeff might be at soccer practice, man. Yeah, I know Jeff's got a couple little ones. So if Jeff comes back, then maybe he can answer a couple of those questions. Yes.
How are you managing everything? You've got a lot going on too. You're organizing events, you've got books to publish, you've got podcasts, you're traveling. How do you manage that?
Great question. Calendar, number one. Everything that I do, it's for the most part premeditated. We already know when our events are coming out, and being able to delegate it helps. I think for me, the way that I've learned is like, I guess you call it, it's like a mental model that I, whether it was event planning, because I did that as a profession, you know, having done a ton of these different types of events. Secondly, having a lot of templates and things in
Mm.
place. So it's helpful. So like a lot of the email templates, like on when we send out reminders to folks to join some of these discussions, to getting team members and creating like it's almost like you're developing, which is kind of how I look at develop. Like, you know, when you're building a business, you need to get all that different aspects of business in order, and that's kind of how I've approached it. So like doing these events, I know that it's gonna, you know, a little bit of prep work that goes into it, making sure the discussions are going to be interesting enough, and at the same time, you know, making sure that we have enough time to plan it out and send out invites, making sure the topics that are, you know, going to be right fits for this, for example, versus if I'm handling like a partnership discussion, having an idea in advance of what are all the different types of partnerships that we can have, right? Similar to you, it's like planning, and it's setting aside the necessary time of how I need to be spending my time strategically, and then actually seeing what the results are, and then evaluating it, and then, you know, going back to the drawing board. So I would say like maybe two-thirds of my time, at least in Mission Matters, is spent on usually business development. Maybe 10%, 10-15% is spent on strategy
Mm.
and oversight, and then 20% is on community building, whether they're the in-person events or other events like this, and then maybe 5% here and there just to oversee the team if they need it. Jeff, for example, oversees the entire book publishing department, right? And so
Yes.
for me, it's just basically weekly calls that I have with Jeff to catch up on my end, and anytime Jeff has any inquiries or things that come up where it requires my attention, he'll send it over to me. But most of it, when we like the full handover to Jeff to take over the whole responsibility, which was essentially my role, it took us about 5-6 weeks. And about 90-95% of everything that he needed to know was already documented.
Wow.
And so it was a very seamless transition. It took like officially 2 months where Jeff felt comfortable enough where I was like, very rarely did he ever bug me. It was like, you know, you get those once in a blue moon occurrences or things that are just new for everyone where, okay, then we need to create a protocol sheet. But for me, it was always documenting and then, you know, researching, planning ahead of time, similar to you. And I've used that events background in how I've approached a lot of things. I just didn't realize that, you know, it translated directly into parenting.
Oh God, absolutely. And things always go wrong.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say actually, I think one of the beauties about event planning is there's a lot of things that never go according to plan, right? And so having the plan B, C, and D in place, I feel like that's a lot of parenting. But I feel like you could probably speak more on that than I.
You know, I think the one thing that I've learned from being a parent is baby's in charge. So,
Can you guys hear me?
There we
yes.
go.
Hey, Jeff.
I was. It was weird. I left and came back in because
Oh,
I was talking and unmuted. Hi, Joanna. Nice to meet you.
it's nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, nice to talk to you. I was listening, and yeah, I'm constantly juggling how to be the best parent I can be and also as productive as possible. And yeah, you already said some things that really hit home. That's for
How
sure.
old are your
I
kids?
think my kids are 10 and 4. And I
Hmm.
think this idea of, you know, and I think we're starting to come to, the pandemic has thrown a curveball into a lot of it, but I think what we're finding, at least I'm finding, is if I can be present in any given task, that does in fact start to, not only does it enhance the value of that experience. So if it's a meeting or a moment with my children, you know, we get the most out of that experience because there's a connection there. So it's productive, right, on a number of different levels, whether it's emotional or strategic. And then when you start to piece those moments together throughout a day, so if you can actually be present in everything you do and it's properly scheduled, so then you can start to, I think the overarching anxiety that some of us feel in our lives is the fact that because we're never present for anything and there always feels like there's more to be done than we have time, that it's kind of chasing us throughout the day. And
Yes.
it becomes this kind of never ending marathon that there's no finish line. You don't know where the starting line is. And you just end up like, oh, I'm stressed. I'm burnt out. I'm anxiety, whatever the moniker people give it. And I've started to notice that, yes, good planning combined with an effective ability to be present starts to reduce that fear and anxiety that I'm forgetting something or I'm not doing something or I'm not being the best I can be at something. And I think when you start to string a few todays together, it starts to reduce that pressure and you start to become, better at what you're doing. And I think that connectivity, surprisingly, for
Mm.
my parenting, and I have one, I'm still learning here. It's a lot of first time stuff. 10-year-olds, because of the pandemic, there's a real spread. I feel like the kids are 2 years behind social and emotional and 2 years ahead in some of their kind of thought processes and
Mm.
the kind of culture they've been, a lot of screen time from through the pandemic and a lot of in a lot of ways it was the only way to socialize with friends. So I think you have these 10-year-olds, they're texting, a lot of these things we would have probably kept in the genie we would have kept in the bottle is out now, and it's a mess. And the other irony is, we've worked so hard to address inclusion and clicks and kind of all of these pieces with our adolescence, and we're starting to see, and I'm talking to some of the educators, and pods are clicks. So we've kind
Mm.
of clicked out our kids, without noticing it. They've come back to school and they're kind of, because of the pods and the small groupings, and we've kind of, moved, I think, backwards in some of those ways. I guess it's a long way of saying parenting is harder and more challenging than ever. But what I will say, circling back to my point, was that when I'm present and I have that connectivity, so if all I do is have connectivity with my 10-year-old, I don't have the answers. I don't know what the problems are. I can't, it's just too complex. I can lean into that connectivity and it generally can get me through everything versus when I don't have that connectivity, her and I are just lost. And I think that comes from being present, and also comes from lifestyle changes. So I spent the last 8 years running a very complex company with millions and millions of dollars on the line on a daily basis and a 3-hour commute, and
No time for anything else.
I pivoted last summer. Yeah, it was three. I was lucky if I could drop my kids on the way to school and get home by bedtime. And I pivoted last summer. And that's where, Chirag and I have been friends. We met on the family office circuit, but, I started talking to him about what he was doing. And that's, I think, the other piece of this is it's easier to be present when you set yourself up to succeed, right? So I've got, a much better balance, which allows me to, be at practice. So I've been able to set my life up in a way that I can pick my daughter up from school or pick my son up from school and go be at their practice, and not be at the practice like on the phone, but really like when, they may look over, who knows when they're going to look over.
Right.
Kids
And then
are,
they see you're
it's
not
subtle. It's
watching
so
because you're on the
subtle. They
phone.
look over
Yep.
once, you can't plan it. You can't fake being present. They look and your eyes you either have the eye contact or you don't. And that's the moment. So it's like, and they're not even cognitive to it. So it's as much a vibe as it is anything. So
But
it's
Jeff, I think one thing that that you're really pointing out is balance, focus, whatever it is. If your job requires you to be on the road 300 days, if your job requires you to have a 3-hour commute and a 12-hour day, there's really not much room left. So, I mean, at some point, you have to make some choices. I would say, I think there are going to be times in the life of an entrepreneur where that happens. So, when I was birthing any of these products, I was all in. I mean, and I would have conversations with my kids. I'd say it's going to be a really rough couple of months. YouTube's going to raise you. I'm really sorry. And I think part of it is one, they're older, but I think because it's not constant, then it felt like, okay, we understand that, mom's going to be working till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock every single night. I wouldn't want it to be all the time because then I don't think that's sustainable. And ultimately, that's not really satisfying either because you end up not knowing your kids.
Yeah, no, I think that the balance is crucial. And you've touched on something. I also know lots of parents who are ever present, but don't necessarily have that connection. So it can be, it's like, I mean, if you look at the traditional, like my dad was never there as much as my mom. And there's obviously scenarios where dads are there much more than moms. And I don't, it's not, it definitely is quality over quantity. So you don't have to be, I mean, I don't think to be a good parent and to have a solid connection with your child that you have to be able to pick them up from school and take them to soccer practice all the time. You might have,
Absolutely.
you might have one day a week. You might have
Right.
one every day every 2 weeks. You might be like, like there's the modern family has every version. The key is to take advantage of those moments, right? However often they are, because they can be super special. So I look back on my mom was much more present than my dad, but that doesn't mean that when I look back on my childhood that my dad was any less a part of it, or vice versa. And I think that's where obviously it's a benefit to have kind of the traditional, that's where it takes a village really plays out, right? Where, having you look at other cultures and how they parent kids, it makes a lot of sense that there's a lot of family involvement, or, even, sisters, brothers, nephew, the extended family can fill in those blanks too. And I think that's valuable.
Yeah, I agree. And then, I think we're probably the three of us here very lucky in that there are probably things that we are able to outsource so that we can spend quality time with our children. And I know that that's a, I'm lucky that I'm able to do that. I'm lucky that I have someone who comes to my house every couple of weeks and does the deep clean so that I don't have to spend my weekend doing it, which means I get to work or I get to spend time with my children or I get to do something else like go to the movies. And I understand that I'm privileged.
No, that's a really good point. I mean, it's,
But I'm going
it's,
to take that chance. And I tell my friends, I'll say, my God, you want to stay married? If you can afford it, you get a cleaning lady. You will stay married. Oh,
yeah, no, and that it makes you think like, here we've got we're privileged and we can afford, support and help and work and childcare, and we've got all of these advantages. I think the interesting part that's going to come out, the difference between the haves and the have-nots has grown as a result of this pandemic, and we're going to have to really figure out how to address. I mean, school was childcare for a lot of working parents, and they didn't have that during the pandemic, and they didn't have the hardware and the software and the resources to homeschool. So we have to assume that that piece is falling apart. So yeah, there's some big macro issues that are going to have to be addressed here in the coming years to figure out how to support working moms and dads who don't have the resources to outsource some of the help.
yeah. And
Um,
Jeff, there's one more thing that I'd point out. So I'm in a CEO group. I'm in Vistage. So, I had my meeting this week, and there are two of us moms who are in the room. And, we do our little check in. And my check in was here's what's happening with the business. And I just got to hang on because the next 5 weeks are just chock full of kid things. So, in my case,
right.
there's Eagle Scout project, graduation, fifth grade promotion, black belt ceremony, just on and on and on. And, I said, I got to hang on. I got to get through this with grace, but also I want to enjoy it because how many times does your kid graduate from high school? What's interesting is you never hear the dads give you an update like that. Like, it's so rare to hear a dad who says, "Oh, and the next month are just chock full of all of these kid things." So, I mean, my husband is an incredibly involved dad, but if he was checking in, I doubt he would really talk about all the kid things happening and
No,
kind of stress and
no,
angst
that
over all the planning that has to happen
it's
to get through all those kid things. So I think there are still, for good or for bad, some unique things that mom CEOs face.
oh,
And I
for
think it's an
sure.
extra
I mean,
pressure.
my my ex-wife, she works harder and longer than I do, and just by probably some historical thinking, she's the default person for a lot of things, and it's been an ongoing, I'd say an ongoing discussion is the polite way to put it on how to share the responsibilities, and I think that's important. I think moms, I mean, I we just have come through Mother's Day, and I had a few conversations for anyone who's, you know, I think I think the pandemic was interesting because it forced some dads who maybe had had a past to, become full-time parents for a minute. Kids are at home, the lockdown. For any dad who's never done that, or any mom, I mean, most moms have. I think, again, there's obviously different versions of this. I don't think there's any harder job than being a full-time stay-at-home parent. Like, it is hard, and there is no it's the most thankless job. I mean, my mom, it's crazy to me. The unsung heroes are the the parents that carry the load. And I think I laugh because, my dad, I used to feel bad for my dad that he had to go to work every day. And then, once I had two young kids and it was all going on, there was days when I couldn't, like I couldn't wait to get in the car. Like, that was my tranquility, was going to the
Mm,
office. At least
yes,
it's
yes,
like managed chaos, right?
yes. Well,
I
and at
was
the
like,
office,
whoa, okay, this is, I had like this
people
whole
listen to
new
you at the
respect for
office.
my
Kids
mom.
don't.
Like, oh, I used to think my dad was the hero of my family. Like, no way. No way. He got all the praise. He got the paycheck. I mean, I have kind of a traditional, my mom was a homemaker and ran the family and ran my dad and ran us kids and didn't have. I'm like, my mom she is the rock star. And it wasn't until, I reached the middle of my life and I wore her shoes for a couple of days that I really felt that. But yeah, the more you're right, the more things change, they still somewhat stay the same.
Much,
Yeah,
much
no,
better.
for sure, for sure. And I think fathers are starting to realize, like, yes, it's parenting, really getting down and dirty, and parenting is exhausting and tiring, and it's not fun all the time, but it's fulfilling. And if you don't get into it and really get messy and get into it, then you don't get some of the real benefits of it. So I think that's kind of where I hope this process continues for fathers, because I'm very engaged. I think part of it depends on where you do it in your life.
Mm,
I didn't
mm,
become a dad until I was, in my 40s. I think that's a little different than some
right,
people. My
right,
my
right.
parents were parents in their 20s. I'm like, I don't want to miss out on an opportunity to, like, participate. That being said, it's the hardest thing I'll ever do by far. There's no job, no company, no anything that will ever compare to the stress and pressure and, good and bad, as parenting. So it's
Just wait till you get to the teenage years.
I know, and that's the other thing. Everyone's like, little kids, little problems. I'm like, oh my God, haven't even mixed in hormones yet. I'm in deep trouble, deep trouble. Well, no, and it's unconditional love. Like, I've never felt unconditional love in my life. It's overwhelming. I mean, I can't separate myself from the emotions. And then I have single friends who are like, Oh, come on. There's unconditional love all over the place. They're like, my girlfriend and I have unconditional love. And I'm like, you must be kidding me. That is the most conditioned, the relationship of husband and wife is the most conditioned love ever. There's 1,000 rules before you even get out of the house. Starts with monogamy. There's one condition.
Right.
And so the idea that, it's just that you have your heart tied to this person. I'm just having to really, really get quiet sometimes and not feel their pain. And yes, I need to, because it's going to get more serious. I always laugh. It reminds me that Parenthood is one of my favorite movies, the Steve Martin movie. And there's just so many little lessons in there that I kind of look back to. And there's this scene in the end of the movie, if you guys remember it, like they do this school play, and they have the little kid who's just a troublemaker and unruly and like can't be controlled and like eats paint or whatever, and he like goes off script and like destroys the whole play and like ruins it, and everyone's freaking out and the set's falling, and the mom's just like laughing, right? And Steve Martin is just, going insane because he's trying to like control his kids. And it's like, I always remember I gotta like try to keep my sense of humor, and it's hard. It's hard to not take their pain and like, take it personally. It's difficult. And he also says in there, he says, he's talking to someone, he says, I can't have the happiness of my day dependent on whether my 11-year-old catches a fly ball. And it's like, it just is so true, the successes of our failures of our kids. It's so hard to keep them in perspective. You're probably much more good at it at this point than I am. When my daughter has a tough day at school and is sad, I take on the emotion, and I don't know how to get rid of it sometimes. So I guess that's my journey, figuring out, how to, because by the way, the next day she doesn't remember it, and the next day it's like left a scar on me. So I guess we have to wear it all like, a loose fitting garment, as they say, not lean in or lean out too much into the parenting.
Jeff, I used to say to my mom friends, when the boys would have little arguments, I would say to the mom friends, moms have long memories, but boys do not. Because, there would be like a scuffle or some bad blood between two of the boys, and a couple weeks later, they don't even remember that it happened. But meanwhile, the moms are like enemies for life. And
Exactly.
God, and you know, you got to get over that stuff. It's not your
No,
beef. It's not your journey. You just got to let them roll.
No, I'm like that. I'm like, why are that girl? Don't you remember what she did to you last week? Oh, Daddy, we figured that
Right.
out. I'm like, we
Exactly. We're
did?
good.
No, we didn't.
Right.
I'm still mad at her. No play dates with her forever.
Yeah, you got to get over
Oh,
that.
yeah, I can see that's going to happen soon.
Put it on the
Shrog's
calendar.
taking notes. He's
Copious
So,
notes from the parents here.
Chirag, the best piece of advice I got from a friend was we were out to dinner. I think my oldest was 2 years old, and our neighbor's daughter was 2 years old. We went out to dinner, and my 2 year old, even then, was a foodie. We went to a Lebanese restaurant, and he wanted to try everything. Meanwhile, the little girl was walking around. So at the end of the evening, the little girl, my son, would never go to bed easily. And meanwhile, the little girl looks up at her mom and says, sleep, sleep, sleep. And I'm thinking, oh my God, she wants to go to sleep. And meanwhile, it's going to take me an hour to wrestle this kid to bed. And my friend looks at me and says, Joanna, you've got to work with the baby you've got. And so,
Oh my god.
and so
exactly.
to this day, Jeff and Chirag, when something happens, my husband and I just look at each other and say, you've got to work with the baby you've got.
Oh, I love
Exactly. Child therapist the other day, and it's, Jeff, they're like pancakes. The first one comes out a little funny.
Well,
Yeah, that explains my daughter.
yeah, no, I have
She's
two
my
boys,
first
but they
pancake.
they couldn't be more different. Two
Yeah,
boys, but they're so different. Body type, interests, personalities, they couldn't be more different. I think God does this to you.
yes, God has a sense of humor. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
I love that.
Well, hey,
Love
this
that.
has been
So
really fun. I hope we do this again.
yeah,
Yeah, for
absolutely.
sure.
We have
Now I know who.
we got.
Now I know who to call when I need some some parenting advice on the fly.
I don't know about that. I mean, really, every parent has their own style. You know what, Jeff? I did also get really good advice from a friend when my kids were really young, and she said, find parents who have a similar parenting philosophy, because otherwise, you'll just feel all alone, and you'll kind of be in conflict.
Yeah,
So
it's true.
on everything from food to sleep to schedules to things like that. So like for example, I'm a Dr. Sears mom, and
Yeah,
man, people are really, they have really strong opinions about Dr. Sears. Whisper fan, and people have really strong opinions about that stuff. And so, I found, other parents who were like me and my husband, and
right.
you know, we learned from
I've
each other.
I've come around. I think Dr. C. I think I like where his philosophies generally.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was a huge Dr. Sears fan.
yeah. No, I've. It's interesting because I've kind of found, you Google something and then more often than not lately, the Dr. Sears opinion seems to land. The more I kind of lean into just kindness and stop, kind of unstructured. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And yeah, like-minded. Otherwise, you're fighting an uphill battle because your kids are hanging out with other kids that are being parented with a different philosophy, and that's just gonna be be tough.
Yeah,
So
and then you end up just, in a situation where like your
right,
kid has an 8 p.m. bedtime, but this other kid has a 10 p.m. bedtime, and your kid can't have a device in his room, and these kids have devices in their rooms, and they're paying their kid all night long.
exactly, exactly.
I will
Well,
say that when my 17-year-old was, I think, 9, he wanted to watch Guardians of the Galaxy, and I said, absolutely not until you're 11. Well, guess what? When he was 11, I had a 5-year-old. The 11-year-old wanted to watch Guardians of the Galaxy, and the 5-year-old got to watch it too, because
Yeah,
that's what it means to have an older brother.
exactly.
uh
Second kids.
huh.
Yep, for sure.
I love that.
So we never really raised them the same way. Any parent who says, oh, yeah, no, we raised them the same way, oh, God, total crap, not
Yeah.
possible.
No, you can't do it.
And
For
then, and Jeff, no matter what we do, they're going to need $50,000 worth of therapy.
oh yeah.
So you
No.
just have to embrace it.
Yeah. No, I started early,
You're
so
screwing
my
them
daughter.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, I love this. No, this was an amazing discussion, and I feel like there's a lot of golden nuggets here that we'll be able to pull from this. The beauty is this conversation is recorded, so we'll be pushing it live and sharing all the links and everything once it's all edited and it's all published. Next week, we have another discussion on Thursday, May 19th, 7 p.m. EST, 4 p.m. PST. And next week's discussion is on the 4 seasons of a business cycle and essentially how, in full swing, where there's new opportunities and new ways to grow and align businesses in general. And so, with that, we'll have another amazing discussion then. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Jeff, for joining us today. And otherwise, hope you all have a great evening.
Super
Thank you.
fun. Have a good evening.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.